Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest installment of Voices from LLT, Language Learning and Technology's very own special podcast. My name is Hayo Reinders, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with two of our special issue editors, Matt and Bronson. Matt, would you like to say hi to our listeners and viewers?
Yeah. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us, first and foremost. My name is Matt Kessler. I'm an associate professor of applied linguistics at the University of South Florida in Tampa, where I do research primarily in call, of course, and second language writing.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. My name is Bronson, assistant professor of second language acquisition. I'm at the University of Maryland, College Park. So I do research on ISLA, instructor-led second language acquisition, and then core is part of my interest as well.
Excellent. And you two have been working very hard and for a long time on a special issue for language learning and technology. I know from experience how much work, time and effort goes into editing a special issue. So we are very keen to hear about the process that, well, let's start with how you came to identify your special issue topic as something that needed to be included. Matt, maybe you can just take us off and just tell us a little bit about the topic that you address in the special issue.
Yeah. So Bronson and I have actually we've known each other for quite some time. We did our PhDs together at Michigan State University. So we're very familiar with each other and each other's work, but we don't really have a lot of interactions, let's say, in the academic world in terms of the research that we do. So we were kind of thinking about our own interests and how we might work together and do something interesting in the field. And so multimodality is one of the areas where I think we both have interests, but from very different perspectives, right? Bronson's is, and Bronson, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but more from the ISLA psycholinguistic perspective, really looking at the processing of multimodal input. And mine's more from sort of a pedagogical, classroom-based second language writing perspective and looking at how multimodal activities are used in the classroom and what types of things teachers can do to improve their pedagogy. So there doesn't really, I think, seem like maybe a lot of overlap between those two, except the word multimodality. But together, I think we sort of recognize through our reading that, in Bronson's area in ISLA and psycholinguistics, a lot of this research, which is really interesting, is looking at input and sort of processing of that input and those processes that go on. Whereas in second language writing, a lot of the research that I'm looking at is looking at the output, right? But we're not really looking so much at the input. So this special issue sort of stemmed from that and looking at how can we connect these two research areas in sort of having studies that look at what is going on in people's heads or what are they looking at when they're engaging with multimodal input, and how does that result in learning and output over time. So that's really where that stems from.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it always amazes me how this sort of serendipity plays a major role in bringing people together who, like the two of you, then chat and say, hey, I'm looking at it from this side and you're looking at it from that side. Maybe we should bring the two together. So obviously that must have been one gap, I suppose, that you aimed to fill with the special issues, bringing these different elements, different aspects together. Beyond that, Bronson, what other areas did you attempt to address in the special issue?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about, when conceptualizing this special issue is the fact that, there is a what we call, a mediation relationship, right? So between learning conditions, learning processes, and learning products. So oftentimes, be it like a multimodal input study, like a caption study, or like a reading while listening study, or in writing study, right? So oftentimes people look at learning conditions and then the learning outcome. So the process in the middle, if I remember correctly, at least from the input side of things, right? The process is often overlooked. And if I remember correctly, Matt said that, in the writing world, often people talked about the process and all that, but then the learning outcome is not always there. So bridging, the three pillars, if you will, right? So learning condition, learning processes, and learning outcomes, is one of the things that we wanted to put more emphasis on.
So tell us a little bit about the process of initiating the special issue. I mean, for some of our listeners, editing a journal issue is unfamiliar, the process of what that entails. So how did you, for example, try to find authors and contributions relevant to this topic?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there are different approaches to special issues, and sometimes they vary from journal to journal. And sometimes the journals leave it up to the guest editors in terms of how they'd like to run that process. So sometimes that involves, you inviting as the special issue editors specific people, short list of people that you have in mind. And other times it involves an open call for anyone who might happen to see that call for proposals. So we sort of chose a combination of those two. We reached out to leading scholars who work in multimodality in both of our areas and asked them, if they had something, if they might consider submitting a proposal. But then we also put out a broader call with the help of the journal as well, in terms of is there's anything interesting that we might see. So we ended up with a lot of submissions. I'm looking here. We ended up with over 70 submissions, which is pretty good, I would say, having edited special issues before. Sometimes you may get 30, sometimes you may get 40. So we were thrilled with 70, and that gave us a lot to work with. But from there, it involved sort of whittling it down, extending invitations for full papers, and then all of those papers went through the peer review process to see if they could ultimately make it into the special issue or not.
I can confirm 70, for those listening, receiving 70 submissions as a response to a call for papers in a relatively specific field is a lot. So that clearly shows that the community is very active and that there are a lot of people working in this space, which is great to see. So I was actually curious to learn, and maybe Bronson, you can start here, and then Matt, you can chip in, what you learned from the submissions that were made. And I'm asking about two insights that you gained. One, like maybe Bronson, you can start with this one. Looking at the 70 papers, which of course includes like 63 or whatever it is that you didn't get to include, but I'm sure some of which were very interesting. What did you learn from this large number of submissions about the state of this specific field?
Well, I mean, it's amazing, as you said, right? So that this community is really active, and then the topic is really diverse. What I really see is the use of technology, not just in language learning, but also in research. We're talking about, for example, eye tracking, and then that could reveal, the cognitive processes that people go through when they encounter multimodal input, right? So be it reading while listening, or captioned video, or whatnot, right? So that part is really exciting, and I think the trend will go on with eye tracking devices being more mobile. We have web-based eye tracking coming up, so eye tracking can be done with a laptop now. So I think these are very exciting developments in the field, especially when talking about how people process different sources of input, right? Auditory, visual, and the pictorial information, for example.
Just staying with you, Bronson, for a moment. Generally speaking, of the 70 papers, what would you say about the, shall we say, average quality of those submissions?
Good. I would say like a lot of them are excellent, but we have a really limited amount of space that we have. But we see a lot of paper having a lot of potential. Some of them, it's a peer review process after all, right? So and then it's a matter of also resources allocation, right? So we cannot accept everybody. That's unfortunate. But I would say the quality is good. Is excellent. Not just in terms of quantity, right? 70 is a big number, relatively. But then the quality we are also very happy with.
That's really good to hear. And to those of you listening who may have submitted a proposal that was not accepted, I hope you can take heart in this observation that the average quality was just very high, and that it's often very difficult for editors or special issue editors to have to decide which ones to include. So if your paper wasn't included, it's not necessarily an indication that the quality was not there. It's just a matter of a lot of competition and only so many papers that can be accommodated. Matt, with the papers that eventually did get accepted and that will very soon, I think, go online, if they haven't already started going online, what have you and Bronson learned from those papers, from the special issue as it will appear?
Yeah, I would say in the special issue itself, we've sort of organized the contributions into three separate areas. We've got a handful of studies that look at vocabulary acquisition. We've got a handful of studies that look at aspects of digital multimodal composing and sort of writing output that people produce. And then we've got a couple that look at the intersection of speech and pragmatics as well. So one of the things we learned is just, I mean, in terms of the topics that people are focusing on, it's so wide. And the research methods themselves are incredibly diverse, as Bronson was talking about. I mean, a lot of triangulation happened in a lot of these studies. Most of the studies that we, I think, accepted were mixed methods. So we've got things like, let's see here, pair talk, students written products, keystroke logging, think alouds, all coming together, 3-4 different methods or instruments coming together in studies, providing really rich data in terms of what is happening when students are looking at something? What are they thinking about? At least, what are they verbalizing? And then how does that translate, into learning vocabulary or learning pragmatics or other forms? So really just the variety of topics themselves and the variety of methods that people are using, right, in one singular study, I think is really impressive.
Nice. And maybe this is a question both of you would like to answer. I'll leave that up to you. But I guess partly based on your special issue, but also everything you've learned from reading those 70 abstracts and submissions. In your estimation, where is the field heading now? Like, what are you most excited about, say, for the next 3 years?
I think a lot of the stuff that we see, as I said, I'm repeating a little bit, with online eye tracking, people collecting data online, and then, really looking at, the actual processes of language learning with technology. I think this is where it is going. Apparently is a thing. It's a huge, there's a huge momentum there. The key, after all, is how people would interact with it, and then the learning process, what kind of learning processes would lead to better learning. So with online data collection, and people can be at their home, be it mobile app or whatnot. I think this is where researchers can dive a little deeper.
Matt, any other?
Yeah, and in terms of building on that as well, I think specifically for me in my area involving writing and digital multimodal composing, I think probably, about a decade ago, there were a lot of questions being posed around, should we be integrating multimodal forms into the classroom, right? If so, to what extent? How much should teachers be allowing their students to leverage non-linguistic modes, right, in the classroom for communication purposes? I think we've seen a real shift, and we're seeing it in this special issue too, of not should this be allowed, but when should we use it strategically for specific purposes, right? I think there's sort of a collective understanding now that multimodality is not a bad thing, right? That when any new idea comes in, it's always, of course, attacked, and as it should be, right? It should be wrestled with and interrogated critically. But I think there's sort of this real movement now to saying, okay, we understand that this is generally a good thing, but what's it good for? And what is it not good for? So I think a lot of the research questions we're seeing are a little more strategic about contextual uses of multimodality in terms of projects and genres and tasks, and when should we use them and why?
Nice one. Just two final questions, really. Either of you or both of you can answer this one. If I may, say, a graduate student or an early career researcher working in this space, what advice, if any, might you have from me, either in terms of publishing or submitting to a call for papers for a special issue, or in terms of the research that you think would be really productive for me to focus on?
I mean, I always teach my students to get a mentor text, and there's so much that you can learn from an example, be it the writing style, be it the topic, be it the literature. So get a mentor text and then see what you can follow, and then, because these are published articles that has gone through peer review. So that would be one of the key advice that I would give.
Yeah, I would also say, if you're thinking about a special issue, don't hesitate to reach out to the guest editors and ask, just, straight up, is this something that, might be considered? Does it seem like it might be a fit? I think a lot of times the special, students are very hesitant to reach out to an editor or somebody they don't know like this. But in most cases, right, the editor or special issue editors are very happy to tell you, yes, that sounds like something that might be a fit. Please submit something. Or no, right? Which will save you a lot of time as a graduate student, writing your abstract, having people look at it. I think it's better to just ask and be direct in that regard.
Yeah, great advice. Well said. I guess the only final question I have is there anything that I should have asked or that you would have liked to talk about, or any other words of wisdom you want to impart on our audience before we say goodbye?
Words of wisdom. Bronson,
I know it's a tall order, but
you're always so wise, Bronson. Do you have anything?
Nothing in particular that I can think about right now. I don't know.
Okay. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. So for both of you, what's next? Any big projects? Any exciting developments?
Nomad just got promoted.
Well done. Congratulations. Very
Yeah.
nice.
Thanks.
Well deserved. You've been working very hard. Yeah.
So Bronson's next. He'll be next.
Okay. No pressure.
In terms of projects, I'll have an edited volume coming out with Routledge on multimodal practices in higher education. So it ties in nicely with this special issue, sort of looking at how different genres are used in higher education contexts. And so that'll be something to look out for here soon. And it's sort of connecting research and practice. The first half of the book is looking at how do people research multimodal genres in higher education? And the second half is more pedagogically oriented, in which some of the authors have recounted how they're actually using them in different contexts for different purposes.
When is that coming out?
That should be next year.
Excellent. Okay. Well,
so it's all done. We're just going through the publication process now.
Right. Okay. We'll put a link to it in the show notes if you have one. Bronson, anything exciting on the horizon for you?
Well, we have a couple of papers on reading while listening in particular, surprise, using eye tracking. So we looked at, how people learn vocab, with reading while listening. We also have been looking at how people learn words with multiple meanings. So these are some of the new directions that I'm taking in research.
Wonderful. You keep on adding to the body of knowledge. Thank you both for your scholarship. Bronson Hoy, Matt Kessler, thank you again for your hard work and your excellent special issue. Until we meet again.
Thanks so much for having us.